All right, President Trump signing an executive order Thursday that will allow tariffs on auto and other imports from Japan to be coming in at much lower rates, 15% versus the 25 to 27.5%. Joining us right now to talk about this is Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. And Secretary Lutnick, thank you for being with us today. Let's walk through how this kind of played out and what the specific details are in this agreement.
All right, so the Japanese, in order to buy down their tariff rate, so they had a 25% rate, and to buy down that rate, they have given President Trump $550 billion for President Trump to direct where and how he wants it invested in America. And if you think about that, that's 0.5% of GDP growth per year for the rest of his term, given to Donald Trump by the Japanese in order to build in America for our national and economic security. It is just the most fun working for Donald Trump. I mean, this deal is off the rails.
Hey, Howard, let's focus just on that piece of it, because you guys have been pretty clear about how you see this $550 billion. The latest I've read on this is that the Japanese are describing it slightly differently. They're calling this a combination of investments, loans, and loan guarantees. They're characterizing it as a way to back up Japanese firms' U.S. projects. Where's the funding come from? And in terms of the leeway that the president has in determining where those investments go?
So the president has complete discretion on where these investments go. The Japanese, it's classic. They are going to meet capital calls in America. They are going to give America money when we ask for it to build the projects. How do they plan to fund it? You know, that's their business, of course. That's up to them on how they plan to get the $550 billion. But what we will see is just the president says, look, I want to build, as an example, the Alaska pipeline. I am going to finally utilize all those assets that we have in Alaska. We're going to build a giant Alaska pipeline, make capital calls to the Japanese. We build that. I mean, think of the employment. You look at next year's employment, it is going to explode. All these factories we're building, all the plants that are coming into America. You know, you look at the unemployment rate numbers today, wait till a year from today. Wow, it will be amazing numbers.
Well, let's talk about that. We do have a jobs report that's coming out in, just over 30 minutes' time. 8:30, we're going to get the jobs report. There have been some questions about some weakness kind of popping up in the labor market at this point. What do you see?
Well, the fact is the Donald Trump economy is just beginning, right? I mean, he's convinced all these companies to come in using his tariff policy to just come on in and build here. Way over $10 trillion of investment. So look a year from today, the end of this year starting, and look a year from today, you're going to see employment numbers that you never imagined, because what it's going to do is it's going to take the 6.9 million Americans who are capable of working, who are sitting on the sidelines now because they just haven't had the jobs they were looking for. They're all going to come into the workplace because we're going to train them. These are tech jobs. These are building these factories and operating these factories. These are great technician jobs, fixing factories, building the HVAC systems. I mean, these jobs are coming, and we're going to train over 5 million Americans for these jobs, and you're going to see unemployment numbers that you've never imagined. If only, and what will help it is if finally Jerome Powell does his job and lowers rates. It is outrageous that he keeps these rates this high. It is absurd, actually.
Well, the Fed's going to be meeting, and they'll make a decision on that coming up a little later this month. In the meantime, all of this rests on the president's tariff strategy, and that has been brought into question by the courts. The president himself said this week that if the Supreme Court doesn't rule in his favor, it would be very, very bad for America. If the Supreme Court doesn't rule that these tariffs are valid, it questions the entire strategy the administration has put out. So what plans are there to deal with it if the Supreme Court rules against you?
Well, let's take a look at the decision that was 7-4 against us in the district court. The lead, right, the lead judge on the bench sided with Donald Trump. The judge before, who was the lead judge, sided with Donald Trump. The new judge that's coming in to direct the bench sided with Donald Trump. And the smartest judge on the bench sided with Donald Trump. I think if you read the dissent, you will see that that is the thoughtful way of dealing with these tariff cases, and that is going to be the underpinning of the Supreme Court's decision that is going to support Donald Trump as he drives our foreign policy. You have to have the foreign policy of the United States of America in the hands of the only person that was elected by our whole nation, and that is Donald Trump. He's done an amazing job with tariffs.
Congress has the ability to do some of this. There are questions, and we'll see. You know, the Supreme Court could go either way, Howard. And I guess the question is, what's the backup plan? Just because so much is riding on this, what happens if they strike that down? Do you go to the Senate and say, give us the power to do this? Are there plans in place to do those things? Is there a plan to give back the tariff money to the companies that have been paying it to this point? How does it work?
All right. The president has all sorts of other authorities, right? So the 232s, so everything we just did with Japan, that holds, right? That's durable, that stays. Europe, that stays. These are autos, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors. Those all stay. So these are durable models. These big deals are going to stay. We have lots of other authorities that the president can use. They're called 301 and 338. I mean, he's got tons of authorities. This was fast and easy and incredibly smart, and that's why he did it. And look what we've achieved. You have over $500 billion a year coming in, asymmetric. Nobody is retaliating. Even the Canadians, the ridiculous Canadians who were retaliating, finally took down the last retaliatory tariffs. Nobody retaliating, asymmetric, right? You have Europe paying us 15% while our exporters can pay 0. You have the smartest trade policy. Now, the icing on the cake was the Japanese deal. Their tariffs go down to 15%, and they give Donald Trump $550 billion to go build what he wants. He wants to bring semiconductors home. You're going to see semiconductors home. How about generic pharmaceuticals? The Chinese make antibiotics. Why are we dependent on the Chinese to make antibiotics? Now the Japanese funding is going to build generic antibiotics in America so we can take care of ourselves. This is the smartest deal that anybody's ever done, and the only way we get this kind of deal done is because Donald Trump's in the Oval Office.
Hey, Mr. Secretary, we're going to hear these jobs numbers, and just to go back to that for a moment, in about a half an hour, I'm curious how you think we should think about the credibility of these numbers, given that the president removed the former head of the BLS. There's a new person in that role. Has there been a change, a meaningful change to the methodology with which we should see in these numbers? And should we think they're more credible than they were a month ago?
Well, I think you take the noise out, meaning if the leader is bent against Donald Trump, then they're going to have, such errors, and those things are bent. We've seen that in all sorts of agencies throughout this government. The people, the holdovers from the Biden administration, they're just bent against the president's success. They're rooting against America and against Donald Trump, and that's got to end. So he can't replace somebody, 2 weeks ago, and you expect fundamental change. But what you will get is an agency that's on side, just trying to do the best and put out the correct numbers. And that's what Donald Trump has to do, and that's what this whole cabinet has to do. They have to get rid of people who are against the president, against the elected leader of the United States of America, and get people on side who just want America to win. Donald Trump wants America to win, and anybody who's against him is really against America being the greatest.
I understand that, Mr. Secretary. I would imagine, for the purposes of numbers, though, that come out of a group like BLS, what the American public, what the world public, the CEOs in America, the Fed, anybody who's making decisions on these numbers, actually, they don't want someone who's there to win. They just want somebody who's there going to give them the most accurate, timely numbers that possibly exist. Just accuracy is probably the only thing that they want. So what I'm asking is, today, when we see those numbers, whether we should believe they're accurate.
I think they'll get better because he'll take out the people who are just trying to create noise against the president. Take out the people trying to create noise. Let's get the accurate numbers, because this is going to be the greatest growth economy, right? 6 months from now, a year from today, as these trillions of dollars of plants and factories. You've seen all these pictures. They are just so many factories going in. The employment situation in America is going to be so impressive. Look, we've got 3% GDP growth. Nothing wrong with the growth we're going to have the rest of this year. But the Donald Trump economy, the explosive power of his tariff policy, his plants being built in America, to come home and build advanced manufacturing in America, when that comes starting 6 months from today to a year from today, you're just going to be impressed. I'm going to come on your show, and I'm going to make you say, Donald Trump was right, and we are all impressed.
Right. Mr. Secretary, two other quick questions. We had Ro Khanna on the broadcast earlier. He was very critical of the president, and particularly, interestingly, critical of the CEOs who were at dinner with the president last night, arguing that effectively, as they went around the table, praising the president, that this was performative. What's your reaction to that?
You know, when you go around the table and you see these CEOs and they articulate that they are committing $600 billion more of investment in America, and you say that's performative, you are telling a joke. They are articulating to the president that they would not have been building these kind of factories, these kind of plant, this kind of massive investment that we together, I'm 64, I've never heard this kind of investment ever. You see it one by one by one. Imagine 3 people spoke and he equaled 1.5 trillion in investment at one dinner. I mean, I think that is performing for the U.S. economy and for the benefit of America.
And can you speak to this? One of the people who was not at that table was a former colleague of yours, Elon Musk. Was he invited to this dinner?
No, I don't know. You know, I don't really go over the guest list of these kind of things. But, you know, Elon's company is doing well.
Did you see his compensation package this morning? $1 trillion over 10 years if he reaches the milestones. What do you think?
Right. If he grows the company 10 times, they can give him $1 trillion. You know, if you make your shareholders, you know, $20 trillion, it's not that bad. But, I mean, it's kind of fun to say I'm going to make my investors $20 trillion. It's pretty impressive, actually. It's kind of funny to think about.
Secretary Lutnick, thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time.
Thanks. Great to see you.